Perfect. We've got several people coming in, but we're going to go ahead and get started so that we can be respectful of everybody's time. I'd like to thank you very much for joining us today. We're very excited to be hosting this amazing panel of women. We have Jennifer Gold, Marcela Denniston, and Jennifer Rothstein joining us today. Our founder and CEO of the Tortora Brayda Institute for Partnership Excellence, Carlo Brayda, is going to be moderating this event for us. So I'm going to turn it over to them and we will get started. Thank you for coming in again today.
All right. Thank you very much, Jill. So yes, let me just kick off with a little background. Our institute, the Tortora Brayda Institute for Partnership Excellence, is a multi-stakeholder think tank based in San Francisco, California, and operating without borders to promote thought leadership in cybersecurity, AI, and cloud. We bring together the private and the public sector, together with academia and civil society, to address challenges. And we've created a number of great task forces pushing the boundaries of digital direct democracy, information sharing, and mitigating the cybersecurity talent gap with diversity and inclusion in mind. So we're proud to host this very important discussion on women in cybersecurity. We still have a vast imbalance in terms of gender within the cybersecurity industry. Depending on the source, between 15 and 25% are women. And we as a society need to be more proactive about diversity and inclusion. In the United States, our ability to be and remain a world leader in cybersecurity depends very much on having the diversity of perspective for superior decision-making in cyber strategy and tactics. Our ability to grow, retain, and promote the role of women in cybersecurity is vital. So this panel is made up of accomplished cybersecurity leaders, truly amazing, and I'm humbled and awed by it. So with no further ado, I would like to introduce our three panelists to you. Jennifer Gold is co-chair of the newly formed National Artificial Intelligence and Cybersecurity ISAO. She is vice president at InfraGard New York and leads network engineering at BNY Mellon, as well as being a cyber auxiliary in the US Marine Corps. Welcome, Jennifer. Next, I would like to introduce you to Jennifer Rothstein. Jennifer Rothstein is a board member at New York InfraGard. She is adjunct professor at Hunter College, president of Women in Cyber, and head of business development, cyber insurance, and legal at Blue Voyant, a top cybersecurity vendor. And Marcela Denniston. Marcela has a distinguished background with the US Navy cyber operations and intelligence. During her military service, she received several medals, including a Joint Service Commendation Medal and a Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal for her work in the Navy Cyber Defense Operations Center and National Security Agency. Marcela is currently the president and co-founder of Cyber Lantern. You can see why I'm totally floored to be in such company. Welcome to you all. Welcome to the panel. So my kickoff question is to you all is why and how did you choose to enter into the cybersecurity industry? I would like to take that first.
I can start.
Please.
Marcela Denniston here. So for me, cybersecurity coming in the door was very interesting because I didn't really choose cybersecurity. Cybersecurity kind of chose me. I joined the Navy straight out of high school. And I came from a bit of a background where my mother was a single mom. I lived in a very urban environment. So my choices, not to say that they were limited, but you know, for me, the option of going out and getting a very expensive loan to go to college wasn't really very appealing because I was going into you know, my college years or my educational years with not a lot of financial support. So I chose to go into the Navy because they did have a college allowance and they also had tuition assistance. And so I assumed that, you know, I would double down and be able to work and also get my degree in the meantime. But when I joined the Navy, I didn't really have any kind of cyber or technical experience, of course, coming straight out of high school. This was back in the days where, you know, if you were lucky, if there was a Cisco lab in your school, and if it did have a Cisco lab, it was in a basement somewhere and it was all boys. So girls weren't really allowed in those spaces back in the days. But I did have an aptitude for science and physics, and I had very good grades, and I was technically college bound at that time. So I did very well on the ASVAB test, which is the test that they give you when you join the military to see what your aptitude and capabilities are. And it so happened that I had the option to take this role that I was told was to be a cryptologist, which basically they told me, you know, we can't tell you what you're going to do because it's all top secret. So that in itself intrigued me. And lo and behold, it was right around the time when cybersecurity was becoming a significant component of our defense and intelligence. And I later found out that that's the role that I was going to be placed in. So I got my start in cyber very, very early on, excuse me, with very little knowledge of computers at all. I can recall my first test was actually learning how to troubleshoot systems. And they would do very little things like, you know, take the ball out of the mouse back when the mouse still had a ball in it, and do very little things like that. And I was just completely lost. So it was a very, very steep learning curve for me. I had to get a lot of help from my classmates in the military, because the other thing they don't tell you in the military is that if you fail at your technical school, they send you to chip paint and mop floors on a ship. So failure was not an option. And that's actually how I got started. And it just took off from there. I was lucky enough to go into a defense role first, and then migrate into the intelligence side of the house, which was super interesting. And I got to work on some offensive operations and research and development. But my start to cybersecurity was probably not your typical start, for sure. Oh, you're muted, Carlo.
Well spotted. That's a really interesting entry story, I have to say. Very, very, very challenging. Jennifer, would you like to also maybe chime in? Either Jennifer.
Oh, I'll go, sure. So I started contemplating actually my first experience with cybersecurity recently. And it's kind of funny. I was sharing this story with my dad, who has also joined, which is very nice. And when, you know, this is kind of a funny story, but when I was maybe 7 years old, you know, and starting to write letters, and my grandmother would have me write letters to my Uncle Jack, and he was a master sergeant in the US Air Force during World War II. And so she was teaching me how to type and how to write letters to him. But I had this concern that I expressed to him that she would read all of the letters that I sent to him. So he sent me back this code, how I would encode, and essentially it was my first experience with encryption, how I would write him letters using this code and what the letters would mean. And it was really like my very first experience with encryption, but it was just fascinating. I loved it that I could put together this letter, and we had our own language, and he would be able to read the letters, and I could write anything in there, and my grandmother would not be able to intercept the letters. And I just thought it was this great, you know, hilarious thing. But I remember, you know, having this complete fascination with things like that always. And, you know, and I have this absolute love of it, encryption and the understanding of it, and puzzles and solving things and the science around it. And, you know, my path was, you know, I started out in college as a psychology major, and then I was, you know, going on to be an English teacher. And I ended up, you know, but I spent most of my time working, you know, I had a job working in the computer lab, and I would spend most of my time there. And it's just where I would just find that I love technology, and it was something that I always found very inspiring. And I had this sort of serendipity experience where I ended up being in the right place at the right time and jumping in the deep end of a pool and ending up landing out of college at a job at MTV Networks in technology support. So that's where my career started, before I went on to the financial sector. So it started on a very fun note, but I've been in the financial sector for over, 20 years. And as a systems engineer and architect, being in that world, you had to have a strong understanding of, from the architecture standpoint, you had to understand, I was dealing with trading systems and low latency trading systems. So you had to know security. And that seemed to just be something I gravitated toward. And my compelling event was, that we spoke about recently was 9/11. So when 9/11 occurred, I felt, incredibly compelled to use my technology skills in a way that would help. I said, how can I support national security? How can I use my skills to, do something bigger? And my ambitions became something larger than my own ambitions. It was to serve a mission that was higher than myself. And it really, I think the mission around cybersecurity for me became solidified. And then understanding sort of this concept of public-private partnerships and what that looks like, and how we connect the dots and work together, and how, as a technologist, I could support, the intelligence community or law enforcement, and, still be a person who does work, for the financial sector, and what that looks like, and the importance of it, and the diversity in that itself, became something, that I was really fascinated by and felt would be of great value. So I've focused a lot of my efforts in that area. And, I just kind of fell into cybersecurity, and it's this challenging area that I just absolutely love. It's evolving, and, all of the domains are fascinating to me, right? Even, and I'm always kind of in the weeds, I love every aspect of it. So.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a very
Thank you.
noble and commendable entry into the industry, and a very laudable call of duty that you heard, and your contribution has been immense since you joined. These are very important, I think, these stories as to how folks enter into the industry. Would you like to share your background, and Jennifer Rothstein, as to how you came into the cybersecurity segment as well?
Yes, sure. Thank you. And I just wanted to say I'm so happy to be here and participate on this wonderful panel, which I think is really important. So thank you, Carlo, for organizing this. And Jennifer, that story from your childhood is so sweet and very memorable. So I'm glad you shared that. And I think it's really nice that we can share stories that are personal to us, because I think that's also how we learn from each other. So I was trained as an intellectual property attorney, and I specialized in trademark law, and I found myself working for an insurance company handling intellectual property claims. And those claims naturally progressed to claims that were taking place on the internet. So threats that were happening on the internet was an emerging risk. And the insurance company that I worked for was AIG. I became really interested in this type of risk, and was there as they started to develop, the term cyber risk and cyber claims, and transferring the risk to this internet environment, which I became very interested in and saw it as an emerging field. At the time, AIG had an ownership interest in a security company, an investigative company called Kroll, and they were handling kidnap and ransom claims. And I just learned a little bit about that and was fascinated by those types of claims and those types of events. And then Kroll opened up a cybersecurity division, and they had explained to me that the evolution of kidnap and ransom was soon becoming ransomware. And instead of kidnapping, humans, there was kidnapping and extortion around data. And again, events that were taking place kind of over the internet. And I, did some research. And when, Kroll had really started to develop this cybersecurity team, I was lucky that I was able to join really from my experience handling risk and cyber risk. But I had a lot to learn when I joined Kroll, and it was definitely a learning experience for me because it was kind of mid-career and I hadn't had any formal training. Like Jennifer, I'm a liberal arts major, English and Spanish. What I found though, and what I like about the cybersecurity industry is that it's very collaborative, and it has to be, because I think the threats are severe, and I think that we need to work together. And I have found the industry welcoming to people from all different backgrounds, and more experienced professionals have been very willing to teach me and train me. So I think it's a wonderful industry to be in.
Thanks for that, Jennifer. So that actually brings me to the next question, the one around barriers to entrance. So you mentioned that the industry has always been very welcoming. Yet today, we still see that the industry is very male biased. Is it? Do we think as a panel that it's the industry needs to be more welcoming and do better outreach in terms of diversity and inclusion, or is it? Do you think more a case that women don't actually volunteer to go down this path? They don't. It's not something that is an initial sort of inspiration for a career. What do you think around this topic of barriers to entrance? Who'd like to take that?
Happy to take it.
Go ahead.
Please. Oh yeah, Jennifer Golf, and then we'll have Marcela.
Sure. So I think that we need to look at how we offer opportunities and how we shape our talent pool much earlier. If we look at other countries and other models, and we look at like some of the things like places like Israel, where they identify skills very early on, and but just the fact that we've innovated so much, and we have children who are digital natives, but we don't have cybersecurity education. So we aren't exposing, children to cybersecurity education. And I think like it all starts really, like I think the whole K-12 area is where it starts, and being able to provide opportunities and education and doing it for everyone. I think one of the barriers, like if you consider barriers, cybersecurity education and the certifications can be cost prohibitive for a lot of people, right? So there are programs, there are various programs. I founded a nonprofit and started working with transitioning veterans because it was something I wanted to support, for cybersecurity training and transition and assistance, finding jobs. That was something I started a few years back because I felt like that was an area I wanted to support. But there's so many people who have, an interest in this field, but it's still, even with the programs that are in place, it can be really difficult for people to afford the education required to get into the field. And it can also be this very overwhelming, it's just very overwhelming to people. Like, where do I begin? Where do I start? There are multiple, paths to pursue. So one thing, CompTIA, we spoke with them recently, and they're, doing a phenomenal job with outreach and promoting education. And I think that's just an area that we really need to focus on from a national security perspective and from an inclusion perspective, offering education and having that available for everyone. And I think ultimately that will help with the talent pool. If you expose people to it and give them the information, then, we'll see who's interested and who's not. So long-winded answer, but I think education, lack of or the inability to fund it can be a barrier.
Yeah, Marcela, what do you think?
Yeah, I would love to piggyback off of what Jennifer said on the K through 12. I would take that a step further because I have two daughters who are 12 and 13 now. And I can tell you from, their father is also in cybersecurity. I'm in cybersecurity. So we have been very, very open to fostering their STEM capabilities. But if you think about like at a very basic level, when you have a very young child, and I'm talking, at the toddler phase, if you have a daughter, what do you give her? You give her a baby doll, you give her a teddy bear, you give her a kitchen set. What do boys get? They get Legos, they get toy cars, they get things that actually require you to think like an engineer, to think like a builder, to think in that creative mindset, where girls are more typically pushed towards being more nurturing and caretaking and taking care of the home. So I think it really needs to start at that level. I can clearly recall one time my daughter came home from school, I think she was in like first grade, crying because one of the boys told her she couldn't play with Legos because she wasn't a boy. So the mentality really needs to change at a fundamental level at the household first, to encourage girls to actually do things that they're typically, not pushed to do. And it's not to say that you have to force these things, you don't have to force your daughter to go play with Legos or cars if she doesn't want to. But presenting those opportunities, the same as you should present a boy with a baby doll, because it's important for a boy to also be nurturing in his life and caretaking. I think that's really where we need to start the conversation. And then that should very easily lead into being able to provide this base level knowledge in the K through 12. And girls will feel like they're more welcome into that space if they're already presented with those opportunities at such a young age. Now, I would say that the other barrier to entry, and this is just a general barrier to entry, which then I think hyper affects women, because my experience has been that women tend to undersell themselves, where a man will, if he can fill, like 50% of job requirements, he'll say, yeah, I'll take the job and I'll learn the other 50%. Women typically won't take it unless they feel like they can do every single one of those bullet points. And that makes it a lot more difficult because women are going to be a little bit more risk adverse. They don't want to put themselves in that position of saying, okay, well, I'm going to, rise to the occasion and learn how to do this. We tend to kind of feel like, okay, I want to go in and do a good job and show that I'm capable of doing this, versus saying, you know what, it's okay that I don't know how to do 100% of this. And because of this, we've actually started at Cyber Lantern, a fellowship program. I actually think one of our fellows is on the line, where we will train someone from scratch. So we have people on our team who have a passion and an interest for cybersecurity that come from backgrounds like musicians, school teachers, people who just have no formal training. And we will actually work with them to train them. And we have obviously a team of subject matter experts to do this, but we want to give those opportunities to those people because we understand that there is this barrier to entry. But for women, it's almost a step further because they will completely undervalue their skills and capabilities coming in the door. And so it's almost like when you're speaking to a woman in an interview, you have to treat it slightly different and almost be more encouraging and supportive than you would for a male candidate, because they already come in with that mindset of like, well, I don't want to commit to this if I'm not going to do a good job for you. I've had several women that I've hired who will ask me for 20, 30K less than a male candidate of her caliber. And so we try to do a lot to make sure that we have even pay across the board. We have equal opportunity and training and capabilities across the board, because women already have this stigma with them when they come in the door.
That's massive, really massive implications of this kind of gender bias in society at that starts at the family level, and that's a big one to change. But it's definitely something that we need to make. We all need to keep on, making a push. And in my particular case, I have a little toddler, and he has a kitchen set and a baby doll, as well as.
Carlo, good for you.
Yeah, and he's good. He loves cooking, like his dad. But Yeah, so one of the things that we talked about on a previous think tank meeting, actually, one thing that came out, that was on a related topic, the one of cybersecurity talent gap. One thing that came out was the idea of maybe working with film producers to create like a series, kind of glamorizing the profession. So because most people don't know about it when they think as kids, when you think what do you want to do when you grow up, you think, well, I want to be a fireman, or I want to be a policeman, or I want to be a professor, a teacher, but nobody really thinks about, you know, what this means, because it's such a new profession, it's such a new area, and it'd be really nice to find a way to kind of glamorize it. And I think I think that's what do you think about that idea? Maybe having like a woman cybersecurity hero that saves the nation, you know, that kind of thing. What do you reckon?
I can start. I think that's a great idea. I think certainly the media can influence, you know, sort of the confidence that, you know, young women may need to see, you know, to feel like, oh, I see this woman as a, you know, cyber leader, and she's doing all these great things. If you see it, you can be it, you know. So maybe just leveraging, you know, that kind of exposure. But I also think that defining what is cyber, that's sort of a, you know, a question that a lot of students ask me in my class. They're, you know, when I say, why are you in this class? And they will say, well, you know, I'm studying engineering, and cyber sounds cool, but I don't know, you know, if I don't exactly understand what cyber is. And I think that explaining, you know, what is cyber, how do we define it, and then how can you participate? And, you know, I think you can participate with any skill set you have. You can find a place. If you have analytical skills, you know, if you're a great communicator, if you're a great listener. And I think trying to expose, you know, especially women who, you know, Marcela, as you said, have those traits of being nurturing, may feel more confident that they have something to contribute. And so I think that kind of education and helping defining what it means to be in cyber, and I know the Department of Labor is trying to, you know, map certain skill sets, you know, the technical skills and the soft skills to actual job titles, and exposing women to all the job titles that are out there. You know, it's more than a CISO, you know, it's, I mean, there's so many varieties. And so I think certainly, and, you know, leveraging the media in a way that, you know, is not just superficial, that we see, you know, some of these crime shows on TV, you know, it dabbles in cyber, but it doesn't take a real look at it.
Jennifer Rothstein, you formed this organization, Women in Cyber. What compelled you to do that, and what is your experience of the barriers to entrance from the standpoint of your organization there?
Sure. I formed it when I was at Kroll. So I formed it about 7 years ago now, but I didn't incorporate until 2 years ago. It was supposed to really be a kind of informal networking group, support group. When I had joined Kroll, I noticed that it was sort of the third sector that I had joined that was very male dominated. So, you know, legal was male dominated, then insurance was male dominated, and then I joined cybersecurity, which is very male dominated. And I felt very intimidated. I had no confidence, even though I felt like my colleagues were very welcoming and they did want to teach me. I had absolutely no confidence. I didn't want to speak on scoping calls. I would join, you know, technical calls, and I didn't speak. I was usually the only woman on the calls, and I was very disappointed in myself. And so I started talking to, you know, other women, also kind of mid-level career that hadn't had any formal training from the legal community, insurance community, you know, risk management, and the security community. And I asked, you know, is anyone else feeling this? We started with 6 women, and we found out that we're all sort of feeling a little bit like this. And then we started talking to more women, and, you know, the conversation grew, and we started to have informal meetings. And, you know, I felt like there was so much interest, and we were really helping each other, you know, not only really sharing information, sharing knowledge, but, you know, encouraging each other to at least say something on a call, or, you know, try to speak at a conference, try to publish, ask questions. And I thought there was a lot of positive feedback. And over the years, you know, we started hosting events. We would do practical kind of tabletop exercises just with women, you know, just to understand how we communicate in our perspectives and train each other. And now we have about 450 members. And I felt like, 2 years ago, somebody had to step up and incorporate it, make it into a nonprofit, put some structure around it, develop a board, and really go out there as an organization. And so that's what we've been doing. And I think it's been really valuable. And I have to mention that men are part of the organization. We can't forget the men. They can be supportive, they should be supportive, they can be, and I found that they are. So I know we focus on women helping women, but men also, can support us and help us, and we should let them.
That's a great point, Jennifer. Sorry, Carla. Because I think that, whenever we build these women groups, we very hyper focus on women, but then, everyone wants to throw stones and say, oh, well, the men aren't inviting and they're not welcoming. But again, if you go back to that very fundamental value of how you're raised and, what morals you're given at a younger age, especially I think in, our age group where it was still a little bit more traditional, it becomes very difficult to get the men on board if you don't include them, right? If you don't have the conversations with them, if you don't also provide them with the information and understanding of why it's difficult for women and where the barriers are and what the biases and stereotypes are that are placed on us that make us uncomfortable. So if you don't include the men, if you don't bring them into the conversation, and if we don't retrain and restructure and, give them our side of the story, then we're never going to be able to bring more women into this, because the men need to also have an understanding of where the challenges are.
I hear that. That's these are great contributions. Let's move on, switch gears and talk about skills. So what we wanted to explore is two things around skills. One question is, what skills do you feel are necessary to get into the industry in the first place? And then the second part of the skills question is, what skills do you think have helped you as individual women to be as successful as you are in the industry? Who would like to jump in?
I can start. So I think there's people, I think we've already kind of covered this, but people really want to hyper focus on the technicality components of cybersecurity, because, in the beginning of cybersecurity, it was kind of like a mandate, like if you're not technical, you don't belong here. And I very much remember being in that space for many years as a woman of, working amongst the greatest NSA hackers there were, and not being an NSA hacker myself or having that level of technical aptitude. It was constantly brought to my attention that I wasn't technical enough. So of course, you have to have an understanding of how computers communicate with each other and all of that goodness. You have to have a base level fundamental understanding of the workings of a computer. But at the end of the day, there are plenty of jobs that don't actually require you to be technical. If you look into the compliance component, that's all very business, organization, policy driven. That's not really a super technical role, right? Even a CISO role. You'll find CISOs who are technical, but it's not an actual requirement that you be technical. So for me, I think it's really more getting down to the core of, do you understand how computers work? And do you have the aptitude to be able to understand how computers work? But also, it's really like, does this interest you? And I tell this to our interns all the time who are coming in the door. And I tell them, like, look, most of our interns go into a security operations center as their first role, because that's essentially, in my opinion, where you get all of the cyber knowledge, right? Because you're embedded in the vulnerability components, you're embedded in the events, you're embedded in the data, you're learning where all of the different data and controls come from, you're doing the analysis. And so that's where we put all of our interns first, because it really gives them an overall understanding. And then it kind of helps them say, okay, well, I really enjoy the data analysis, but I don't really enjoy the vulnerability management or tweaking side of the house. And then you can kind of choose and pick your pathway based off of this. So whenever someone asks me, what technical skills should I have? I say focus in on what a security operations center does. Try to get a job in a security operations center and see where you want to go from there, because you don't necessarily need to be technical. For me, the biggest skill that has helped me in cybersecurity is communication. And the reason for that is, when you have all of these super technical analysts, guess what? None of them know how to do well because they're introverts. They don't know how to communicate. So just the ability to be able to communicate, which again is a soft skill that typically women tend, I'm not going to say that all women are, I don't want to stereotype it, but we tend to be more communication focused just based off of, our degree plans of literature and such. It's such a huge benefit to be able to communicate what you're trying to get across and be well spoken and well written. And if you can hone in on a skill like that and then have the basics or fundamentals of the technical components, how computers communicate, how security operates. I always say start with Network Plus and Security Plus first. And if you can understand and grasp those concepts, and those concepts are of interest to you, then that's a great starting point from my perspective.
I would have to agree with, in terms of communication, I would have to absolutely agree with that. I feel like that has been, a huge piece of my success. The fact that, I have a strong technical background and I'm able just to speak to people, for some reason that seems to be an anomaly, but it's served me well. So, if you can combine the technical skills with communication skills, and regardless of what field you go in, communication skills are essential, so having that. But even more so, like when I think about cybersecurity and I think about what we're facing right now and our adversaries, a lot of the problems, a lot of the challenges we face from the threat landscape aren't, solely technical. A lot of them are around human behavior. So if you look at the social engineering aspects of things, understanding human behavior, understanding, the psychological levers that are exploited by bad actors, having a sense of, psychology, social engineering. There are so many areas within security that people can pursue, from the different domains to, red teaming to, blue teaming, like all different aspects of it, defense, offense, right? And it's so diverse and really interesting. Forensics, law enforcement, the intelligence community. How are we going to secure all of the innovation? IoT, and certainly, we know AI and cybersecurity and that convergence. So there really is a tremendous need for diversity in this field, and a lot of things, that people can focus on. But I think from a technical standpoint, I would say, like, if you wanted to start with the basic, like Network Plus, Security Plus, right? Foundational basics of understanding, or, like Linux OS, right? Just understanding, some basic OS infrastructure and, starting there and kind of moving through the domains to see what the areas of interest are helpful.
And Jennifer, Rothstein, would you like to add to that?
Yes, and I think, sort of echoing what everyone said so far, I think cyber is also a people problem. And as Jennifer was saying, when we think about threat actors, there's motive there is psychology, and then there's sort of the human response, being kind of on the incident response side and the risk management side. And certainly insurance is always, when something bad happens, you call insurance, and now in cyber, you call, a forensics team, investigative team. I think understanding and being kind of empathetic that something bad has happened to a victim, and it's important to be a good listener and really be sensitive to a threat or an event that could be crippling, not only to an individual, maybe a solo practitioner or somebody who owns a family-run business, but also, some of the big corporations that are out there. Reputations are damaged. There are consumers, employees that have damaging effects based on an incident. And so I think being able to understand what it means to mitigate risk and protect either an organization or a person, and then when something bad does happen, having that empathy and that sensitivity to, you may understand it from a technical perspective, you may have been in law enforcement and understand it from that perspective, but from a CEO's perspective, or an employee whose identity is now compromised just because he or she went to work, just having that kind of sensitivity around these issues, I think that's also really important.
Thanks, Jennifer. So before moving on to my final question, really, I wanted to ask the attendees if there are any questions from the floor, to please put them in the chat, and we'll attempt to field those before the end of the session. And as you do that, as you type your questions in, if you have any, I wanted to explore now what you see as the role of women in cyber over the next 3 to 5 years, and also what advice you'd give to a group of high school girls today. So it's a double question. It's a little bit different, but I'm trying to pack in the final punches really for this 1 hour session. Who'd like to take that first?
Oh, it looks like Jennifer Gould is okay. I thought she was maybe frozen. I can take that. I mean, with the high school girls, I would say don't let the conversations or the fact that you may be the only girl in the room deter you from what you love to do and what you're passionate about. If anything, see it as a challenge, right? You have to learn new communication skills to communicate with your coworkers, who are mainly boys or male. And I say this all the time, like, this is a long journey that we have ahead of us to kind of bridging the gap between the current level of women in cyber and the future level of women. And I tell people all the time, when someone tells me, oh, we really want to put a diversity hire in here in this role, a lot of times you'll hear from people, oh, well, that's just not the right way to go about it. You shouldn't just be putting someone in there because they're a woman or they're a diversity hire. And I tell people, you know what, I'll take it. Because if I get into that position, whether it's from the perspective of fairness or not, that's one more woman that is now going to expand the ability for other women to come in, who's not going to have the same level of biases. And there's a lot of bias in the hiring process. So don't give up on that, on that dream. If that's really your dream, don't let a few people who are naysayers deter you, because you'll have naysayers on both sides of the house, on the female and the male side of the house, right? Carlo, I think we talked a little bit when we were prepping about, I spent 2 years in the Middle East in Abu Dhabi, working with locals there on their national cybersecurity infrastructure. And there were women who worked there, but there was a huge gap between what was expected from the women and the men. So the men could come in from high school, not even, they didn't speak English, they didn't know anything about cyber, and the women had to have computer science degrees. So they weren't high school women, they weren't out of high school, but it was a similar situation in that, they were fresh out of college. They were amongst all of these men, which in their culture already naturally, mixing with men from a work perspective is not common yet. And so I would always tell them, don't feel intimidated in this scenario. You are smart, you are bright, you're here for a reason. You've been chosen to do this for a reason. And if you love something and you're passionate about it, don't let a few people who are naysayers, push you away from actually doing what you love to do. Because guess what? It really doesn't matter what field you go into. You will always run into adversity. You'll always run into people who, won't be supportive necessarily. So don't let that detract from your choice to do what you love to do, and be a trailblazer, right? Know that you're a trailblazer. Until this day, the girls coming out of high school will be trailblazers in cybersecurity when they go in. So take on that responsibility and know that you are paving a path for the girls behind you to make it easier. Because the more of us that have the courage to go in and stay in this field and do what we're doing and hold our head up high and not allow anyone to detract from, you know, our path, the easier it's going to be for the girls that are coming behind them. And so I always, you know, stress that don't allow anyone to deter you from doing anything that you're passionate about. And if that's cybersecurity, then so be it.
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you, Marcela. That's real passion and real valuable advice there. Jennifer Gold, you're next.
Sure. So I think in terms of what teams look like in the future, you know, we have to, you know, in 3 to 5 years, right? If we look at the world at the moment, we're facing a lot of problems in, you know, everywhere, right? And how are we going to solve problems if we're insular? You know, we must like have diverse teams to solve hard problems. We need different perspectives to solve hard problems. Otherwise, we're not going to solve all of the challenges that we face. You know, not if we are kind of operating with a groupthink perspective on the world, right? So I anticipate just the natural evolution of things is that and we're seeing this, you know, I mean, with this administration and with more, you know, women in these positions, but I anticipate, you know, more women going into these roles and stepping up and, you know, taking roles in cybersecurity and in this field. And I feel like it's opening up, you know. If I look at where I was in my career early on, I would have never dreamed that it was a possibility for me, like early on, even though I will say I have, you know, proceeded with a lot of tenacity to pursue my dreams, but I never really saw in front of me like a board position. You know, now I sit on boards and, you know, but I've had mentors who have, you know, who have kept raising the bar for me. And it's really, you know, and I would say to, you know, to anyone entering this career and to high school girls, you know, surround yourself with people who are supportive, with people who are positive and, you know, aligned with your values. And I think it's very important the people you have in your life, you know, and, you know, ensure that you have people who encourage you and support your dreams and that you have, you know, for me, I also have found that it's important that I have mentors who are different than me, who provide different perspectives, who don't look like me, who are, you know, completely different and give me guidance and see the world differently than I do. And, you know, who can challenge me in ways that frustrate me sometimes, but, you know, I rise to the occasion and I've grown tremendously as a result of, you know, having mentors. And I think it's so incredibly important. I have an incredible mentor who's helped me, you know, greatly. And, you know, so I think for, you know, high school girls, it's very important, you know, to, you know, find, and I see this with like a lot of girls. I have 2 sons in high school right now. And so girls in this age range, I see how they struggle with self-confidence, you know, so I think in general, you know, find your confidence and be authentic in this field. You know, at one point in my career for 12 years, I was the only female like engineer in a group of almost 200 men. And, you know, and I had to find my own confidence to navigate that and, you know, strong boundaries to have respect. And I knew, you know, I had to just be my authentic self. And eventually, you know, my skills would prove who I am, what I'm about, and it would all work itself out, you know. But having people in my life who encouraged me, my family and mentors, you know, helped tremendously. And, you know, I think it's very important to, you know, have those types of positive people in your life. But for young girls, I can see, finding your confidence, not feeling like you have to emulate anyone else or be anyone else but yourself. I think that's really, really important. And, I think, and I don't know if either of the women on this panel have seen this, but, I've seen like other women in male dominated fields where they feel like maybe they have to emulate men. And I've never felt that way. I've always felt like I just have to be myself. And so I think self-acceptance and confidence are incredibly important.
That's
And, that's another thing that I think we need to really support. And I think that Jennifer Rothstein's done an incredible job with her organization and, making sure that women have a support network to encourage each other in that way.
That's a great point, Jennifer. And I mean, I would piggyback off of that with being supportive of other women in the space too. I know when I first got into cybersecurity, it was like if there was any other woman, it was almost like it was either her or I, right? Like there was no like we could both be in this together. It was very competitive amongst the women. And very judgmental, right? If you're wearing makeup and you're wearing heels, then you're judged. If you're not wearing makeup, then you're judged for other reasons. And so just being very supportive of each other. So if you're in a high school situation, for example, and you're in cybersecurity and another girl, band together, come together and be supportive of each other. We have our little wine and wine sessions. That's what we call them, where, I get together with other ladies who are in cyber and we have wine and we whine about all the stuff that we have to deal with. And, we just kind of let it out and talk to each other. And there's a lot of, cohesion when you have that support system with other women. And so it's really important at a young age for girls to understand that, right? Like you don't have to compete against each other, be catty or be judgmental based on how she looks or how she behaves. You're all kind of in this together to win, and being supportive of each other is very, very important. So that, you don't feel like you're the outlier in the situation. And I feel like that's still the case in a lot of scenarios where, there's a lot of judgment even back and forth between girls and women together.
I would completely and totally agree with you. And I 100% agree. Absolutely. And it's so important.
Jennifer Rothstein, I saw you were just about to jump in.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
I would also say I agree with what has been said so far. I would say that we also have responsibility, as women who are in the field, to sort of pay it forward. And so I also encourage women who are in the field to at least identify at least one other woman who may be shy, may be quiet. It's easy for me to do it sort of in my class, but even when you look at the high school level, or even in the women's group, just try to find at least one person who you think maybe wants to be more involved but doesn't know how, or you identify something that like she has some kind of skill set that you might want to help her bring out, and I think just making sure that we take a turn at being a mentor to somebody else, and trying to draw out somebody or give somebody confidence. And I think it just starts with one. And what I tell students is you just have to have one person take an interest or tap you on the shoulder and give you an opportunity. And even in a setting in the work environment or in the school environment, encouraging students to do something that's beyond the confines of just studying for an exam and getting a grade. Like write an article, start a group. Like with high schoolers, I am encouraging high schoolers, start a cybersecurity group, at your high school, an after school activity. And I don't have a lot of buy-in yet, but I'm trying. But just, to expand, not just, studying the material, but to really kind of contribute. But I guess my message is, we have to pay it forward, and we have to identify somebody who may need our help. And then hopefully that person will remember that and then pay it forward.
That's outstanding. I think this has been just an absolutely fantastic session, really awesome. We got a lot out of this. A lot of soft skills needed, a lot of inspiration. I'll definitely be listening to this again to get motivated myself in the future, because I got a lot of really, really sound advice out of this. I have really not enough words to be able to thank Jennifer Gold Jennifer Rothstein, and Marcela Denniston for participating and sharing so openly and so candidly today. We've learned a lot from you. We're very inspired by you, and I'm sure that anybody that will see this webinar in the future will feel the same level of goosebumps that we all feel right now. So thank you for your participation. And over to Jill, if there's any other item before we close.
So I would just like to thank everybody for participating today. This has been a wonderful experience, and I so appreciate Marcela, Jennifer, and Jennifer for taking time out of your day and sharing with us your experiences. I actually, Jennifer Gold was just thinking, I have an 8-year-old, and I think I'm going to go make a code and write her a little note and see what she thinks about that, to give her a little message and see where we go with that. If you'd like to learn more about the Tortora Brayda Institute for Partnership Excellence, you can visit our website. There's a QR code as well as the website in the slide on your screen. And if you're interested in joining, there's a QR code that leads directly to our member page. And we would love to have you be a part of everything that we're doing right now in this industry. So we look forward to joining you again. Please check out our website because we have more events coming up, and have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.